Hey guys, it is Markets with May, and today is March the 1st. As per usual, a very exciting day and a little bit of a change of pace here. I am going to do the classic comments, and then I'm going to pass it to this awesome guest that we have, Bryan Young, who is, this is the craziest 25-year resume within autos that I've seen. This guy knows his stuff, so I'm super stoked to have him on the show today. I'm just going to try to keep, if I can, I love to chat, and you know how much I am passionate about this stuff. But I want to go through a couple of things on the markets, a little bit of cleanup from yesterday, because I think I was not super clear on something that I do feel very passionately about. But really quick, market, FinViz, very red today. We do have consumer doing a decent job because we did have some amazing reports from Target. And I almost want to kick myself because I think I actually said in the show, I prefer even Target is doing better than Amazon because Target has just been such an amazing retailer. I don't know why it didn't click in my head, buy some calls on Target, but they really did crush it. It's unbelievable. We'll talk about that another time and why I'm still passionately somewhat short Amazon. At a price though. Okay. And then also energy is continuing to rally as it should. I have no idea why anyone would think anything other than these companies are going to crush it. Yeah, the rest of it is a bit red, but my Google is not doing too stupidly. I continue to think that if you can do credit spreads, bull credit spreads, but get back. Okay, get back behind 2,500 even if you can. But even here at 2,600 handle, 26, blah, 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 it's cheap. Okay, this is 20 something times for a company that will have zero problems no matter what happens on this earth in the next quarter. Or in the next year, quite frankly, and for a while is what I'm saying. So Google, fine places, but nothing's really changed there. The only thing I wanted to really go through is yesterday. I really talked about shorting the cruise liners. And it was interesting because I had a chat with David this morning. David, who is always trying to make sure that I'm crystal clear and not just talking in my head. Such an awesome guy. He's like, listen, May, I didn't short the cruise liners yesterday. I didn't understand where you're trying to go with that. And I was like, oh, shoot, I should have been more clear. Okay, here's the deal. Here's the cruise liners. On Friday, they are getting clobbered today. They're down anywhere from 5 to 8%. And I think they could go farther because the whole thesis on the cruise liners is based on this idea that we're going to have this recovery in travel. I still believe in the recovery in travel, for the record. That said, the cruise liners have a very particular dynamic, and the only other company that has this dynamic is possibly Delta. And I just want to be crystal clear on this so that you guys, you don't have, it doesn't have to be a big position, but maybe consider buying some of the puts that are very close because the notional value on these is so cheap. The puts aren't that expensive. But on Friday of last week, the cruise companies and the powers that be on Wall Street all talked about this route, which the cruise ships depend on in the spring, to be closed. And that's because the Baltic Sea cruises all end up in St. Petersburg. But that's not what I talked about yesterday. I talked about this route, which is the majority of the money that is made in Europe and European cruising. And that is the Mediterranean Sea. And what I was trying to say that I must have just totally coughed up, sorry guys, is that the reason that this is a problem is right now what cruise ships do at this time of year is they move all their ships. It's called a relocation cruise, and they do it in like December. I've been on one, so this is something for whatever reason I happen to have very firsthand experience with. They're going to move all these ships from here down to the Caribbean and down to Latin America for that cruise season, for the winter cruise season. And the only other place they'd move it is there is actually a passage into the Mediterranean that takes you through the Middle East down to Singapore. But here's the thing, because China has more or less closed it off, not as many boats were redirected there. Most of them are hanging out. Okay, boats were redirected there. Like, let's be honest. But most of them were going to the Caribbean to sop up that demand because we definitely are stressed out in the U.S. and we're traveling. And then also Latin America, which has been more or less okay in the environment relative to other parts of the world. Okay. During the month of, starting in late April would be the earliest, but definitely in May, they do the reverse relocation, bringing them back through to the Mediterranean for the spring season, which begins. I have been on one of those early cruises too, strangely enough, long story, but they start in like early April. March, there might be one or two sailings, but early April, they'll start sailing the Mediterranean through May, which means they got to bring the boats back. And the only way you do that is through this thing called the Straits of Gibraltar. And then if you were trying to get to this spot, which is the Black Sea, this would be where you'd want it if you were trying to support these countries right here with military troops, and then you'd also bring military ships this way and try to support from the north. This is just straight up military history, every single war. You could research it, and I swear this is not mailing, trying to be clever or anything like that. This is literally like if you grew up in a military town, people say this until you can't forget it, essentially. But essentially, you would bring boats through the Straits of Gibraltar, and then this point as well, which is the Bosphorus, beautiful bridge in Istanbul, check it out. You would bring the boats through there. But these are really narrow. So if you had a cruise ship, yeah, you could evacuate people onto the land, okay? But you wouldn't necessarily be able to get your boat out right away is the issue, right? So it might not be the smartest thing for you to do that, but this is actually where a ton of your income comes from. The other thing that people often forget that we talked about yesterday and we've been talking about all along, which is why I'm so massively bullish Mosaic, is that everybody's all over the commodity complex as relates to oil. And recently I've been seeing CNBC start to talk about wheat and that part of the complex. But I really need to make this crystal clear. Look, when we're talking about the price of wheat right now, that incorporates wheat in stores, which is at lows because of the monsoons that happened and some of the crap weather that happened all throughout last year. So we're talking about the wheat, corn, soy meal, soy crush, the whole entire complex that's in actual storage. And there's some projection of what will be able to be produced in the following year, okay? Now, again, this whole area, despite being massively population dense, is also farming country. So this whole, and it is true for fact that in France they do try to mostly grow organic, so their use of fertilizer is a little bit different. But for larger consumption, if you will, all of them still need fertilizer. None of them produce fertilizer. The country that they primarily, China, not exporting fertilizer. So that really does leave Russia, Canada, and the United States for the nitrogen portion of NPK, which we've talked about over and over again. So from a cruise ship's perspective, you got rising energy prices. You're going to have to source food despite the fact that you've come down dramatically from a nation that is essentially having issues with a particular area. So your food cost is going to go up, your fuel cost is going to up. And by the way, if you were to put a ship in there, you do have some potential risk of not being able to get your ship out. And also, by the way, I don't know why people aren't thinking stuff is going to be canceled here in the Black Sea. I mean, I'm just saying, I think if the idea was that the cruise ships would be able to make their cost of capital and finally be able to pay off their debt, which by the way, most of them have due some of it this year, but a bunch of it next year, I don't see how that story still holds. And there isn't really another great fundamental reason to own these. So I am actually saying short the cruise liners for now. It's going to be super controversial and it shouldn't be a gigantic thing. But as far as lottery tickets go, it's not a terrible one. Okay, with that, hopefully that was clear where I stand there. Bryan, are you ready? Are you ready to tell us all your amazing knowledge about the autos industry? Do you have something specific you want to start with, or do you want us to just pepper you like crazy with questions?
Well, first, hey, thank you. Thank you, May, and David for just reaching out. And I just like to offer up my knowledge from, it's hard for me to even say it, my decades in the automotive field. And that
decades, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it overlaps with the markets. I always have to share with people, hey, I am just a retail investor. So I got burned trying to learn options. And I quickly realized, you know what? My mental capacity on that front is kind of limited, but what I do,
it's okay. I am more than sure.
Yeah. So I just try to learn, and I've been regaining some confidence in that area. But yeah, for automotive, I can share just some general oversights and some specifics within the industry. I have a lot of colleagues and friends who may not be as well versed and may just see a stock ticker or hear, hey, this company such and such, they're doing really good. Where should I put my money? And because of my broader experience firsthand in the industry, I'm able to provide a little more insight. And hopefully with that information, people can be more informed where to put their money. I'm not giving anybody financial advice, but
No, no,
more
it's okay.
is good. Is good. So yeah, yeah, you can
Okay.
pepper me with questions, or I can share some
Okay.
broad overviews.
I will pepper you with questions. Okay, so I think one thing that might just be helpful for context. Can you tell us about tell us a little bit about your career more in the nitty gritty so we can make sure that if there's a question we didn't think of, but you actually know a lot, we'd be thrilled to tell you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for those that obviously may not know me, my name is Bryan Young. I'm one of the few African American designers in the automotive industry. And I always like to make sure to let everyone know, designer, not engineer. So there's a difference. But there are an ever increasing number of underrepresented in the design community, in the art and design field. So I went to one of the most prestigious art universities in the world. I mean, we may hear words like that thrown around as hyperbole, but I went to CCS in Detroit, which is where I'm located now in suburban Detroit. Anybody who's seen that movie Top Gun from decades ago with Tom Cruise, and if you remember in the beginning of that, his boss said, "Hey, we're going to send you to the school for the best of the best." Well, CCS is like the best. You got to get selected to get in. There's no guarantee once you get in that you will get into the car design program. So that's the best of the best. So I was able to get into CCS, then get selected to get into the car design program, went through, graduated. I come from a family of creatives. My mom was one of the few African-American women, female architects at her firm back in the late 60s, early 70s. My dad was mechanical. He was in Vietnam. He worked on fighter jets. He was a gearhead. So you put those together, you got me. Fast forward, and I started my career. It hasn't been an easy journey. A lot of my colleagues, they were blessed to get picked up at a car company, and they've been there ever since. Mine has been ups and downs, but I think the silver lining of that is that I've probably been exposed to a wider range of not only products, but like the behind the scenes at the business aspect of a lot of companies, from the OEM side, from when I lived and worked in Germany, to here in North America, where I worked my way up. I was the first African-American director of design at a John Deere subsidiary. Me, an African-American kid, being plucked and put into Iowa, in the middle of Iowa, and designing tractors. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the vehicle, so to speak. It's about solving a problem for the user. That's you, me, whether it's a pair of shoes, whether it's a car, whether it's a UI UX interface. Most recently, I was on the design team for the current Corvette. I didn't know it at the time, but I was working with the supplier Bosch, and myself and a colleague, we were brought on board, outside consulting. It was almost like CIA, where we're sitting there and we're handed a stack of paperwork, and you look it over. Me, I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd for American history, global politics, global history.
We're all nerds here at Markets with May, so that's awesome.
So, everything overlaps, and
yeah,
I made
it does. It really does.
I'm a movie nerd as well, but everything overlaps, and so yeah, I was involved in that in a small way. I like to say in a small way, but the UI UX, which many may not know, that's user experience, user interface. Whereas, so your phones, whenever we pop open our phones.
Wow.
How many taps does it take for you to get into an app and get engaged? That is the user experience. That is the user interface. So I was involved on that. And that was probably one of the more fun parts, because we got to go out to Las Vegas to where one of the racetracks are located. If you buy a performance vehicle from General Motors and you check off the box, you can go there and you can get taught
That is so fun.
yeah, my career has been, I've been at General Motors twice in my design career, Ford. I've designed everything from speaker grills for Lexus vehicles to semi trucks and school buses. I was at Navistar for 5 years, which they were just recently acquired by Trayton Group. So they're a publicly traded company. And I'm sure I'm missing something else. I've got several patents behind me.
Oh, really? That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
So for the past several years, I've had my design
That's
consultancy,
cool.
public speaking, and subject matter expert consultancy on auto, EV space, and the market. So that's a bit about me.
So if we're thinking about new technologies within the auto space that you feel like no one is monitoring or getting, is there something that you want to share with us there?
Oh, well,
Like, what are
I
you
don't know.
seeing that's really new that maybe like people don't know or didn't realize?
I would say for
Low bar, because I
yeah.
know little about cars. So, like,
Well, that one, you know what? Here's the funny thing with that, and I right now uh, I have my sources, I guess you could say, my sources
yeah,
throughout my near 30-year career at a lot of companies and a lot of supply base, and I cherish those. I never share any names unless they
yeah.
give me approval. But what you're hitting on is, I swear, in the last couple of weeks, I've been meeting on as far as upcoming technologies and technologies that are here now. One that kind of gave me the willies, but that could be a potential opportunity. And it's just the continued integration of our daily lives. You know, we talk about the Ring doorbell camera.
Yeah.
Uh, you can pipe that into your phone, right? So you can see who's at your door. So the acceleration of healthcare into your automobile, and people may say, well, what do you mean healthcare? And here's the example that we talked about for a long time in a meeting I was in at a supplier company. The scenario: you have your Apple or your Fitbit or whatever, tracks your heart rate and all of that. Well, imagine that being, connected to your vehicle. Most cars nowadays have heated and or cool
Yeah.
seats. High-end luxury even have massage seats. So it is not a stretch, and this technology is here now, where your smart devices, your healthcare can be piped into your seat.
Huh.
It can be customized to know, okay, May, you're getting in right now and driving. You already have your weight, height, and all of that. It takes your blood pressure, your heart rate. It can say, hey, we know that, basically, and I'm speaking as if I'm the technology talking to the user. Hey, we noticed that your heart rate has been up the past several days you've been driving. Would you like for us to contact your doctor? Yes or no? Hey, we noticed, and here's where it got scary, lightheartedly, but we joked about, where do we go with this artificial intelligence? What if that same technology is, and here's the speculation, this is not factual, but this is, I really try to differentiate between the two, but we were gaming out how far this technology can go. And the scenario was, what if this technology is saying, okay, we noticed your heart rate has been up a little bit. We noticed either your weight has fluctuated up or down, because it's been tracking you if you're active.
Yeah.
It knows that you stopped at Starbucks a couple of, that, and so what,
Stop getting pizzas, May. Is that what
yeah.
you're saying?
So, but
You
that
need
is,
to eat healthier. It's like my mother is going to be in my car. Oh my gosh.
well, I was the one in the room, and I jokingly said, with my useless entertainment knowledge, and I said, hey, when does Skynet take over? And some people got it. And some of the younger people said, what is Skynet? I'm like, dude, you got to watch The Terminator. But this smart technology, but that's one where it's the
So inside versus outside? Because I feel like everybody's always focused on self-driving cars and all that stuff, but you're like, no, there's so much that can go into the car that's very quickly,
Yeah,
potentially, yeah, if I've got
yeah.
you.
And the other one
Interesting.
thing that's predominantly been my career as predominantly
Yeah.
an exterior styling designer.
Mhm.
But we have a saying, a lot of professional car designers, yeah, the outside is what captures your eye, the inside is what captures your wallet.
Huh.
Because
How about that?
unless somebody's a
Makes
superhero
sense.
or you're driving in a vehicle with a mirror next to you, you don't see the outside when you're in the car. You most of your time is spent in the car, inside. That's why interiors have dramatically increased
Hmm.
in investment from a lot of the traditional OEMs, and that's also why technology has increased, or the capital put into those, and the translation of that. I always try to look at, I really try to be intentional with my vocabulary. I try to stay away from words that are absolutes like always and all of us. But here's one where I can say always, always. We are finding that if you can capture people in the interior, and if suppliers and OEMs spend more money in the right places on the interior and on technologies associated with that will make the user experience better, that typically, or that always, translates into basically, as I like to say, a better return on Wall Street for publicly traded companies. Because if you build, it's like that's the saying, if you build it, they will come. If the product is good and it is easy to interact with, and the technology is not scary, one good experience, that person's going to tell to others, and so on and so on. And out of how many of those will somebody say, you know what, I'm going to go to that dealer or go to that website and look at that vehicle. They may not like that one, but then they may see another car in that lineup from that brand. Boom, you've got a sale. And then you've got another, and multiply that by how many individuals across the country, if it's a global brand, across the world. And then that translates into, again, I go back to, that translates into hopefully a higher stock price, higher value for shareholders. So that's a little bit how I think. I don't consider myself an expert in the market. I just look at it as logic from my years of experience, and frankly, from getting burned. I mean, yes.
Who do you think is doing the best job on that, you think, right now?
As far as
The
what,
thematic that you just described of like really understanding the relationship between a cozy interior and then using all of this really advanced technology to upend it, and the consumer, what we investors care
yeah,
about, like selling
yeah,
cars. Who do
yeah.
you think
Well,
got the best grip on that?
well,
Or do you feel like all of them are doing huge amounts of R&D, or
well,
what do you think
yeah.
they?
Well, that is one expenditure, on a side note, that I really try to. I don't. That I just say, this is what I look at. I really try not to tell someone else
Huh.
what to do with their
Yeah.
money, because I feel like whether you're a millionaire or what I call a thousandaire, it's your money. But to your one point, or a sidebar, look at what the OEMs are spending in R&D. When you look at those quarterly, or you hear the earnings call, and you look at the, as I like to call me old school, I say, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the paperwork,
Yeah.
what are they spending on R&D? Because that tells me a lot from being on the inside. And to your two questions, who I think, I interpret it as two questions: who I think is doing it good right now, and who I think is, as far as the interior, with capturing money, with capturing sales.
You got
Uh,
me right.
yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, revenue. Surprisingly, the ones that I think are building the best products may not actually be making the most sales. That are sleepers in the market. Volvo. Everyone knows a Volvo, but I think Volvo
That's
comes
so
across.
ironic. That's okay. I got you. Because I
Yeah,
feel like people hate on Volvo like crazy. And I'm like,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
okay, just say, keep going.
but from a, from, so, and if anybody's watching, what the heck is he talking? Volvo? That's my mother or grandmother's vehicle or whatnot. I look at the consistency of quality. I look at the interior, and maybe I'm biased as a designer, but I've been involved with color, finish, materials. That means the leather, all of these accoutrements that really come together as a whole that gives you a good experience. Volvo, which is now, if people don't know, is technically a Chinese company. It's owned by Geely, and they have taken their Volvo brand, and some designers spun them off. And if anyone watched, the American Super Bowl game, there was a commercial for Polestar. Now, and I was busy. I didn't watch any TV that Sunday, so I didn't see the commercial. But Polestar is part of Volvo, which is part of Geely. And Polestar is their EV brand, completely EV brand. There is an opportunity that I see. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they're public yet. I think they are looking at coming to the stock market through a SPAC. And I think it's Guggenheim. But that's one brand. And on the interior technology, here's where I do believe Tesla. And when you, in my experience, when you say Tesla, it's like, uh-oh.
Everybody freaks out a little bit.
Yeah. But Tesla, I will give them props in areas, and there are some areas where they are leading. They are leading. They are pushing. The thing with the auto industry, and I'm drawing a blank on quote, but who said this quote, and I believe I want to say it was Alfred P. Sloan, and he said technology in the auto industry, and this is way back, maybe I think the 1930s or 40s. I was reading a book, on the auto industry, and he said technology doesn't stay exclusive forever. Just think about that. I mean, when like the intermittent windshield wipers were invented, and like I said, I'm a nerd, I remember this, but when the intermittent windshield wipers were invented, something simple as that. Before this, you either had fast or slow. You didn't have when that was invented, that was exclusive. Everybody else figured it out. So technology-wise, I do believe Tesla's in the lead on that in some regards. Interior-wise, and to your other, as I like to say, I'll park my car on this. But another brand that I don't think gets enough recognition, and I wonder their longevity, but they're like a little well-kept secret, is Mazda. Not too many people give them, a second notice, because they're probably viewed as, a entry-level brand. They used to be part of Ford. Ford owned them, and they were released. I can't remember offhand the years, how many years ago it was, but they have consistent interior quality. And I'm not and by the way, I'm not a salesman for any. I will criticize where it's due, companies and vehicles that I've even had a personal hand in. But that one I think is, if you look at their vehicle lineup, look at what they're trying to do to move into this EV future, there may be hope for them. And I know I just gave them like a positive, and I am just saying there may be hope for them. And the reason for that is, and this is not like some, like I'm Yoda from up on high saying this, but not all of these companies are going to make it in this transition. And especially when you're talking publicly traded companies. So I would say just be mindful of who we're looking at and where we're putting our money, whether you are a millionaire or, as I like to say, a thousandaire. Hopefully,
I think this is Mazda. Do you trade this ticker of Mazda, or are you like, no, this is just my honest opinion, I'm not in Mazda right now?
And I'll be honest, and here, one thing you'll find me, Mazda is not in my automotive portfolio. I'm pretty anally retentive when it comes to my investments, and the auto sector of my portfolio is pretty structured. I have an unofficial, like, a one in, one out, or two in, two, like, basically, if I want to bring on something new into my portfolio, then I'm looking at, okay, where does it fit within my own personal strategy?
Yeah.
Who do I have to release? Kind of like a coach for a sporting team. Hey, you're good, but this one over here has some promise. And I've gotten really rigid about sticking to the timelines I've laid out for myself with my investments. So, short, mid, long term, and Mazda is one that it is on my list. I'm old school. I have sticky notes like all
So you're just
around.
waiting for your in. I get it.
Yeah, but to your question, yeah, unfortunately, no, I don't have it on there. But that's why I keep looking at it. I keep an eye out for
Well,
stuff.
let me switch gears a little bit
Hmm.
here. I always look. I noticed on your list you used to do work with Oshkosh Trucking and some of the other
Yep.
more trucking side of the business stuff. Do you have
Yes.
any thoughts on like PACCAR or Cummins and what's going on there? I know they're doing a range of stuff with hydrogen and all kinds of like upgrading to try to get the commercial side of the world to
Yeah.
behave a little differently. I won't say too much, but because in case it's not an area for which you feel comfortable talking, but
Oh no. Yeah. I will let you know if there's anything that I can't
oh,
speak
good, good,
on that I
good.
don't quite. But yeah, that PACCAR, Oshkosh. That's one of those where, again, not. I just look back at my career so far, and I'm like, there are places and projects I've forgotten. So when you mentioned Oshkosh, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, Oshkosh, and it within that segment, that is what I consider what I call the less shiny objects.
Yeah,
Uh, 'Cause,
they're boring. They definitely are good companies. It seems like
yeah,
to me.
there's opportunities there, and for new, this is my opinion based on my experience and based off of what I have seen in these areas, and in the area or the lane of PACCAR, Oshkosh. I mentioned one of my former employers, Navistar, which is now Trayton, or underneath Trayton. Navistar is of international truck and buses. That lane of commercial vehicles, it may not be as shiny as a Tesla or as a Lucid, but if you really do your homework, there's some opportunity there. And when it comes to alternative fuels, alternative power sources, which is driving this push in the auto sector, or one of the reasons for the push in auto sector to go to EV, it's how do we, at the end of the day, how do we transition from oil and gas? In PACCAR, in Oshkosh, in like I mentioned, Navistar, uh, the move to hydrogen. I'm I'm a student of history on this, where to me that's been one that for the past, as long as I've been in this career professionally, that seems to be the one that, just wait, it's around the corner. Just I read that in
Oh, so you think it's
I,
a lot closer?
I'm sorry.
You feel like it's quite close. I mean, I know some of the other countries have been experimenting with it a little faster than we have in the U.S., but I'm
Yeah,
always curious, like, how are people, like, what's the timing? What are people seeing? What are they thinking? That sort of thing.
it has to be. And here's where, that saying goes, that this may be above my pay grade, or above my head on this, or someone who is way more
All right,
knowledgeable.
all right.
But the stipulations and the regulations that we have in the U.S., uh, they take a lot of time to change. And an example of that, just one example, in the 70s, and I came across this reminder, I think within the last week. It took, if I'm not mistaken, 5 to 7 years to just get the regulations approved to go from round headlights to square. And I was just blown away for a headlight,
Yeah.
So
So
that's
it's
an example of some of the regulations that need to, when it comes to hydrogen, we really need some support from the regulators. But itself, if it is a viable resource, at the end of the day, in commercial truck, it is about money, and I think that's can be said about everything. But when you're talking in that space, when you have driver shortages, that's one. But there's a shift of older drivers retiring and not getting backfilled. You have the driver shortages. You have the high cost of diesel. You have the regulations that require drivers. They can only drive so much, and then they have to shut down for rest. This is an area I know because my brother right now is a truck driver. My uncle, two uncles, my dad. So I remember as a kid going out on the road in that space. So yeah, I'm well versed in that from a personal and a professional. To your question though, I do see that lane of PACCAR, Oshkosh, of commercial. I encourage people just keep an eye out. Again, that might not be all bright and shiny, but that is an area where I see an easier acceptance of alternatives to gas powered, whether it's EV or hydrogen, because the money saved can go right back into the company. Think about how much is spent on a fleet for fuel, for maintenance for an engine, overhauling. All of that doesn't go away. It shifts a bit. It shifts, but you get so much more back into the pocket, so to speak, of the shareholder or the investor or the trader.
I don't want to dominate the question. So, David or James, do you guys have any questions for Bryan, or should I keep going? Should be David. You definitely own some Tesla. David, don't be shy. Usually you pepper me with questions to make sure I'm. All right, no worries. He might be just
Okay.
he's on mute. Okay, so
Wait a minute, I'm unmuted. Thank you.
okay, good.
Wow.
Hey, it's
Technology is not my long suit. Okay, so thank you. I feel like I'm in automotive royalty. Can you comment on how long it will take Ford or General Motors to become profitable as far as for the EV space?
Well, and this will go into my opinion, not factual. So yeah, but in my opinion comes from knowing the industry from a historical standpoint, and specifically the history. You're asking General Motors or Ford or Ford. I've worked at both. So this comes from my part factual of what I've seen, what I've studied, what I know. And to your question, how long will it take for them to become profitable? Realistically, if things on the extreme positive side, on the extreme, best case scenario, we're sitting here in 2022. My opinion, my guesstimate is maybe fully in the next 10 years. That is it. That I want to put like big asterisks next to that, and like a rainbow, and to make, because that means if everything goes absolutely according to plan. And the deeper dive into that is materials. Even my 10-year-old son knows about the chip shortage because he can't get a device. That's now we have this unrest, unfortunately, with Russia and Ukraine. That's having an impact on the whole auto industry. Even if a company doesn't have, say, a manufacturing facility there are materials that are required in practically every car that are sourced from that location, including EVs. So so factors like that. Then you have the struggle, or I don't know if struggle is the right word, but what I see coming down the line that could potentially be obstacles for full profitability. You have UAW contracts. You have the potential of, where do these workers go? Where do these human beings like you and me, who are putting these vehicles together at manufacturing facilities, where do they go? Because what I mean by that, EVs do not require as many parts, as a traditional car. The engine and transmission alone from a ICE powered vehicle, that's gone. So think about that revenue base, that tax base for a community. And that's where I think some may, some should probably consider those things when they're hearing all these future rosy projections. Oh, we're switching everything over in 3 years. We're going to be full on profitable from EVs in 6. And I'm thinking, I'm just as I like to say, I'm just a lowly old car designer with a little knowledge and logic behind me. I'm listening to you, but I'm studying history. I remember when I wasn't driving, but I remember when the fuel crunch hit. American car companies had to shift over real quick. One, quite frankly, they made some really crappy cars that people had to buy, which put them off and made a lot of American auto base go to, Honda, Toyota, and a lot of them never came back. That's because they rushed. And unfortunately, the American legacy companies paid for that. So making sure that they do this right is one. Two, the environment. Will we have another market correction? I'll just say these are the unknowns, and that's why I say my rosy projection is 10 years. And then lastly, to your question of when I think that they could be like fully profitable from EVs, and here I will share this: they are in my portfolio. So in my auto section of my portfolio, I have General Motors, I have Ford, I have Stellantis, which is formerly FCA, formerly Chrysler. But the cost that at the end of the day, and this is what I really try to implore to retail investors like myself, to traders, to really don't get too focused on, wow, if I'm living in I was in LA recently, and yeah, you see Teslas everywhere. And then you may get the mindset that, wow, this company, these cars are going to take over the world. Well, if you're here in Detroit and I go out to Dearborn when I have meetings out there, Dearborn is Ford country. I see a Ford on every corner. That's like saying, wow, Fords are taking over. So my point is that, one, the area in which you are in may not be representative of the rest of the country that will buy that product, that will buy that GM or Ford. And EVs themselves, the high cost of EVs in correlation to the average cost of a car, in correlation to just an average citizen trying to buy a car, it's the salaries. And so now we're off into a whole nother discussion about, livable wages. Those are factors, in my opinion, that go all the way back to your question of when will GM be profitable? And I haven't even talked about competition yet. So that's another thing to think about. So I realistically think it may be a while. You're talking, what have they mentioned recently? They're going to invest $80 billion in switching over. And I don't want to, here's where, and I will stop on this, but this is one of those that really, gets me to like feeling like I need to go to therapy or something. Like, really, you're going to put that out there? Because here's the caveat: when my friends who are like just surface automotive and they're putting their money in whatever car company, Bryan, GM just announced they're going to invest $80 billion. That's a lot of money. And I said, newsflash, they were going to invest that money anyway. That's the amount of money that GM had already planned for either new vehicle development or existing vehicles that are going to be overhauled. they've just shifted that. So that was money that was already baked in. And that's what, and I get companies have to, they have to do their job. And, when it moves the markets a bit for them, okay, but let's give some people some context. But yeah, so that's a whole nother chapter as far as the competition, livable wages, civil unrest with what's going on in, and with Russia and Ukraine, how that impacts whether GM is going to be profitable fully from a full-on EV lineup. And I know I said one thing, but another thing, just simply put, I've yet to have any of my colleagues answer this fully when we're just sitting around with a beer or a glass of wine. At the end of the day, there's a layer of concern. We're projected to make all these EVs. Who is going to buy them? Who is going to buy them? And then how does that translate back to the stock? So,
at the price points, right?
Yeah.
If they were cheap, it wouldn't be a problem, but they're not.
Hey, one more thing, Bryan. Since you're a designer, I thought of this. If you've been in Teslas, I'm sure you have. The interior is very minimalist, and that may be part of their, profitability plan. I mean, so are you seeing Ford or GM being more simple with their interiors?
Well, sorry, I chuckled because, sorry, you're seeing the enthusiasm. I've been in this a long time and I'm still like a kid when I get to experience products that aren't due out on the road yet, which I have and I can't share what I've recently been in. The interiors of pretty much all vehicles, pretty much all vehicles, they will be simplified, but they will be simplified in line with that brand's design language. So, and by design language, that's just nomenclature that we use in the industry, part of the VBL, or the visual brand language. So, say when you look at a Cadillac, it's a Cadillac. Even if you're not a car person, you start to get trained that, okay, I noticed that small Cadillac has this crease here, and then I saw this bigger one and it has this crease here. In the interior, there was a surface that went down like this, and then I was in another one, same thing. Tesla, their design language on the interior is one of tech, of a modern aesthetic. Ford, GM, a lot of other companies, you're going to see or continue to see a proliferation of the digital, as my mom calls them. Hey, are they putting TVs in cars? I said, Mom, we don't call them TVs, but you're going to see a lot more digital displays. You're going to see a lot more simplicity. One, because it's sometimes it's easier to manufacture. A reduction of parts means more money in the pocket.
Right.
But there's a balance between having it be too simple and giving the impression of cheapness. So you want to keep it simple. And this is what I'm just going to say, this is what I've seen. It's going to be simple, but it's going to be distinctive, and it's going to still come across as a feeling of premium. And once you get a buyer, once you tap into that part of their psyche, that X factor that you can't explain, when you see not just a car, but when you see, and I challenge you guys, like after today, when you're just chilling at home and you're either on your iPad or watching a movie or whatnot, I challenge you, just observe. And if you see something that gets your heart going an extra beat, you're like, wow, look at those shoes, or wow, look at that watch. Wow. What captures you? It's that emotional attachment, that X factor. I don't know why, but I like that. Then the analytical kicks in, like, okay, is it safe? Can I afford it? Blah, blah, blah. So that is what you're going to see on the interiors, is that more usage of recyclable material, alternatives to leather. That is the one thing that I can give credit to upstarts like Fisker, Rivian. They're using alternatives to leather to convey luxury. You're going to see that more in the OEM, or excuse me, the traditional OEMs or legacy makers. And Now, what I also can share is they may have been like late to the party. I always use the example of I always forget the admiral's name from World War II. Right before Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, he's known as warning his leadership, "Are you sure we should do this? Are we going to awake a sleeping giant?" And the resources of Ford and GM and now Stellantis, yes, they've been behind. They've been kind of like a slow bear waking up, but they're awake. And they have the manufacturing resources to provide a lot of variety. And that's the one area where I feel that Tesla could be extremely vulnerable, and even Rivian and even Lucid to an extent. All the traditional companies, they can provide a variety of interior options. They can provide a variety of vehicles and have them at a low price. And you're seeing that with Chevrolet with the upcoming electric Blazer, which they're saying is going to be about, I believe, $35,000. That's still kind of a lot, but you know, they can do that because they have scale, they have size to their advantage. But hopefully I answered your question, David. I'm
Yes.
not on the interior, somewhere else. But
Yes, thank you.
mhm.
I feel like
Yes.
we're coming to the end of our time, but this was amazing. We might have to have you again on the show sometime soon. This is really helpful. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. I will see you guys tomorrow, and good luck in this crazy marketplace. Bye.